Adults and real grandkids here. Dad said after he made my son sit at separate table. He ate alone while others laughed. I moved over to him. When $290 bill came, I left cash just for us. Dad smiled on instantly. The anniversary dinner invitation arrived on thick cardstock, embossed with gold lettering that screamed expensive. 40 years of marriage, my parents wanted to celebrate at Riverside Manor, the kind of restaurant where reservations required 2 months' notice and entrees started at $60. Mom had called 3 times that week, her voice pitched with that particular blend of excitement and control she'd perfected over the decades. Everyone will be there, sweetheart. Your brother Tyler with Madison and the twins. Aunt George is flying in from Phoenix. We've reserved the private dining room. She paused then, and I could practically hear her weighing her next words. You're bringing Cameron, of course? My son. My beautiful, sensitive 12-year-old boy who happened to be adopted. The child I brought home from Guatemala when he was 8 months old, who'd filled every corner of my world with light I didn't know existed before him. Obviously, I'd replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the familiar knot forming in my stomach. Mom had made a small sound, something between acknowledgement and resignation. Well, it'll be lovely to see him. That hesitation spoke volumes. 4 years since I'd brought Cameron into our family, and my parents still treated him like a temporary fixture, a phase I'd eventually outgrow. They were never cruel exactly, just perpetually distant, as though loving him fully would somehow validate a choice they'd never supported. The day of the dinner, I helped Cameron into his navy blazer, the one we'd bought specifically for occasions like this. He'd shot up 3 inches over the summer, all gangly limbs and oversized feet he hadn't quite grown into yet. Do I have to tuck in my shirt? He asked, making a face at his reflection. Grandpa Raymond's rules, I said, adjusting his collar. You look incredibly handsome. He grinned, gap-toothed and genuine. You always say that. Because it's always true. The drive to Riverside Manor took 40 minutes through Saturday evening traffic. Cameron chatted about the soccer tournament his team had coming up, about the science project on renewable energy he'd started planning, about whether I thought they'd have that chocolate lava cake he tried last time we'd gone somewhere fancy. I gripped the steering wheel and tried to ignore the anxiety crawling up my spine. Riverside Manor occupied a converted Victorian mansion overlooking the Columbia River, all soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. The maitre d' led us through the main dining room to a private space in the back where my family had already gathered. Mom wore burgundy silk, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Dad stood beside her in a charcoal suit, looking every inch the retired finance executive he was. Tyler and his wife Madison were there with their 8-year-old twins, Aubrey and Jackson. Aunt Georgia held court near the windows, her jewelry catching the light with every gesture. There she is. Mom came forward, kissing my cheek with her usual careful precision, designed not to disturb her lipstick. And Cameron? She patted his shoulder the way you might acknowledge a neighbor's dog. The table had been set for 10, an elegant arrangement of white linens and fresh flowers. Place cards marked each seat in calligraphy. I scanned them quickly, my heart sinking as I registered what I was seeing. 2 tables. The main table sat 9. A smaller table near the corner, clearly meant for children, held a single-place setting. What's this? I kept my voice even, though heat was already rising in my chest. Dad turned from his conversation with Tyler, his expression pleasant but firm. We thought it would be better this way. The twins can sit at the main table since they know how to conduct themselves at formal dinners. Cameron can have his own space over there. He gestured to the smaller table like he was offering my son a privilege. Cameron's hand found mine, his fingers cold. I looked down and saw the confusion in his eyes beginning to harden into something else. Understanding. Hurt. He's 12 years old, I said carefully. Aubrey and Jackson are 8. Madison jumped in, her voice carrying that patronizing sweetness she'd perfected. But they've been raised understanding proper dining etiquette. We've been taking them to restaurants since they were toddlers. The implication hung in the air, toxic and unmistakable. Cameron, foreign-born and adopted, couldn't possibly measure up to their biological children. Never mind that I'd taken him to countless restaurants, that his table manners were impeccable, that he was kind and thoughtful and everything any grandparent should be proud of. This is ridiculous, I started, But Dad held up his hand. The decision's been made, sweetheart. This is our anniversary celebration, and we've planned it a certain way. Adults and real grandkids here at the main table. He smiled like he'd just settled a minor dispute about seating arrangements, completely oblivious to the bomb he'd just detonated. Real grandkids? The words hit like a physical blow. I felt Cameron's hand tighten around mine, felt him trying to make himself smaller, the way he'd done in those early months home when he was still learning that he belonged with me, that I wasn't going to send him away. Aunt Georgia spoke up from across the room. Oh, for heaven's sake, it's just dinner. The boy will be fine over there. The boy. Not Cameron. Not your grandson. The boy. My vision blurred red at the edges. I looked at my mother, hoping for something, anything. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just fussed with a flower arrangement at the center of the main table. Tyler had the decency to look uncomfortable, but he didn't say a word. You know what? I forced myself to smile, to keep my voice light. You're absolutely right. Cameron, honey, why don't you go have a seat at your table? He looked up at me, confusion mixing with a hurt. Mom? Trust me, I whispered. He walked to the small table, his shoulders hunched in that terrible way that made him look like he was trying to disappear. I watched him pull out the chair and sit down, alone, while my entire family settled themselves at the main table, laughing and pouring wine like everything was perfectly normal. I crossed to the children's table and pulled out the chair across from Cameron. What are you doing? Dad's voice carried surprise and disapproval in equal measure. Sitting with my son, I replied simply. Don't be absurd. You belong over here with the family. I met his eyes directly. I'm with my family. Mom made a sound of exasperation. You're being overdramatic. We're trying to have a nice evening. Then you should have thought of that before you decided my child wasn't good enough to sit with you. I took my seat across from Cameron, who was staring at me with wide eyes. Around us, the private dining room had gone very quiet. Even Aubrey and Jackson had stopped chattering, sensing the tension. This is unacceptable, Dad said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood, the one meant to end all discussion. I completely agree, I replied calmly. It is unacceptable. Which is why Cameron and I will be sitting here. A server appeared, professional and carefully neutral, ready to take drink orders. The evening proceeded in the most awkward fashion imaginable. My family at their table, Cameron and I at ours, separated by maybe 15 feet, and an unbridgeable chasm of hurt feelings and broken trust. I ordered appetizers for us, carefully selecting things I knew Cameron liked. When they arrived, I made conversation with my son about his school, his friends, the book he'd been reading. I pretended not to notice my mother's periodic glances in our direction, the way Tyler kept clearing his throat like he wanted to say something but couldn't quite manage it. Cameron picked at his calamari, his usual appetite gone. I'm sorry, he whispered. My heart cracked. Baby, you have nothing to be sorry for. I ruined Grandma and Grandpa's party. You did nothing wrong. Not one single thing. I reached across the table and took his hand. What they did was cruel and unacceptable, and I want you to understand something. You are my son. You are my real family. Biology doesn't make someone family. Love does. Respect does. And anyone who can't see how lucky I am to be your mother doesn't deserve either of us. His eyes filled with tears he was trying desperately not to shed. 12 years old and already learning to armor himself against this kind of hurt. From the main table, I could hear Dad holding court, telling some story about his golfing trip to Scotland. Madison laughed at something Tyler said. Aunt Georgia was describing her new house in Phoenix. They carried on like we weren't even there, like they hadn't just shattered something fundamental. The entrees arrived. Cameron had ordered the salmon, I'd gotten the filet mignon. The food was probably excellent. Riverside Manor had a reputation for a reason, but it all tasted like ash in my mouth. I pushed a piece of steak around my plate, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Cameron's sake. The servers moved efficiently between our tables, their professional masks firmly in place, though I caught one young woman giving us sympathetic glances when she thought no one was looking. From the main table, Aubrey's voice carried across the room. Grandma, can we go to the zoo next weekend? You promised. Of course, sweetheart, Mom replied, her voice warm in a way I rarely heard directed at Cameron. "We'll make a whole day of it. Maybe get ice cream after." Jackson chimed in with something about wanting to see the new tiger exhibit, and I watched my parents' faces light up with genuine delight. That's what grandparent love was supposed to look like. Uncomplicated. Enthusiastic. Freely given. Cameron noticed too. I saw him watching them, saw the longing in his eyes quickly replaced by resignation. He'd learned not to expect that kind of attention from them. At 12 years old, he'd already internalized that he would always be outside looking in. "Tell me about the book you're reading," I said, desperate to redirect his attention to something positive. He glanced up from his salmon, which he'd been methodically cutting into smaller and smaller pieces without actually eating any. "It's about this kid who discovers he can time travel, but only backwards, and only to moments he's already lived through." "That sounds complicated." "Yeah, it gets kind of confusing. Like, he keeps trying to change things in his past, but it never works out the way he thinks it will. Sometimes he makes things worse." Cameron paused, then added quietly, "I wish I could go back and change things sometimes." My throat tightened. "What would you change, baby?" He shrugged, still not meeting my eyes. "I don't know. Maybe I'd be different somehow. Better at fitting in." "Cameron, look at me." I waited until his eyes met mine. "You are perfect exactly as you are. You don't need to change a single thing about yourself. The problem isn't you. It's never been you." "But if I was their real grandson..." "You are their real grandson," I said firmly. "The fact that they can't see that is their failure, not yours. Do you understand me?" He nodded, but I could tell he didn't quite believe it. How could he, when his own grandparents treated him like a temporary visitor in the family? Across the room, Tyler caught my eye. He looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. Madison was whispering urgently to him, and I saw him shake his head in response. Whatever she wanted him to do, he wasn't willing to do it. Aunt Georgia, on the other hand, seemed perfectly content with how things had unfolded. She'd launched into some story about her new neighbors in Phoenix, gesturing dramatically with her wine glass. Dad and Mom were listening with exaggerated interest, clearly grateful for the distraction. It struck me then how easily they'd compartmentalized what had just happened. A brief unpleasantness, quickly smoothed over and forgotten. They probably thought I'd cool down in a few days, that we'd all pretend this dinner had never happened and go back to our usual pattern of polite distance punctuated by awkward family gatherings. They had no idea what line they'd crossed tonight. No understanding that some things, once said, couldn't be unsaid. "Mom?" Cameron's voice pulled me back to our table. "Yes, sweetheart? Can we leave after dinner? I don't really want dessert anymore." I looked at his barely touched plate, at the tension in his thin shoulders, at the careful blankness he'd pulled over his features like armor. He was trying so hard to be okay, to not make things worse, to be the good kid who didn't cause problems. "Actually," I said, an idea forming, "I think we should stay for dessert. You were looking forward to that chocolate lava cake, remember? I'm not really hungry anymore." "I know, baby. But here's what I think. Those people over there want us to slink away quietly, to be ashamed or embarrassed. They want us to feel like we're the problem. But we're not going to give them that satisfaction. We're going to sit here, we're going to order the most decadent desserts on the menu, and we're going to enjoy ourselves despite them. What do you say?" A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Spite dessert?" "The very best kind," I confirmed. He actually laughed, soft and brief, but real. "Okay. Spite dessert it is." When the server came to clear our plates, I ordered the chocolate lava cake for Cameron and the creme brulee for myself. I also ordered 2 specialty hot chocolates with whipped cream and chocolate shavings, completely unnecessary and absolutely perfect. The server, her name tag read Jennifer, gave me a knowing smile. "Excellent choices. I'll have those right out for you." As she walked away, I heard Dad's voice rise slightly. I said we didn't need to see the dessert menu. "Just bring us the check, please." My mother's response was too quiet to hear, but I could imagine it. She'd want to leave as quickly as possible, to escape this situation she couldn't control or reshape to her preferences. But the desserts at Riverside Manor took time to prepare properly, especially the chocolate lava cake Cameron had ordered. We had at least 20 minutes before they'd arrive, 20 minutes of sitting in this uncomfortable standoff while my family pretended we weren't there. Cameron pulled out his phone, then glanced at me questioningly. Usually I had strict rules about phones at dinner, but tonight I nodded. Go ahead. He started texting someone, probably Marcus, his best friend who understood complicated family dynamics better than most kids his age. I pulled out my own phone and saw a text from my friend Lauren. How's the anniversary dinner going? I typed back, currently sitting at a separate table from my entire family because they think Cameron isn't a real grandkid. About to order spiked desserts. Living my best life. Her response came almost immediately, are you serious? Do you need me to come get you? No, but thank you. We're staying to make a point. We'll fill you in later. Call me when you're home. Love you both. I set my phone down and found Cameron watching me. Was that Lauren? Yeah, just letting her know we're okay. Are we okay? It was such a simple question, but loaded with so much weight. Was he okay? Were we okay as a little family of two? Would we be okay after tonight? We're going to be, I promised. It might hurt for a while, and that's okay too. But we have each other, and that's what matters most. The desserts arrived in all their glory. Cameron's chocolate lava cake was a work of art, the molten chocolate center oozing perfectly when he cut into it. My crème brûlée had a flawlessly caramelized top that cracked satisfyingly under my spoon. The hot chocolates were topped with mountains of whipped cream and dusted with cocoa powder. Whoa, Cameron breathed, his eyes widening at the spread before us. Spiked desserts don't mess around, I said, and he grinned. We ate slowly, savoring every bite, making a show of our enjoyment. I even asked Jennifer to take a photo of us with our desserts, and Cameron actually smiled for it, a real smile, not the forced one he'd been wearing earlier. Across the room, my family demolished their meals with obvious enjoyment. They ordered more wine. They toasted my parents' anniversary with champagne. Through it all, Cameron and I sat at our separate table, eating quietly, existing in our own bubble of hurt and determination. When dessert came, that chocolate lava cake Cameron had been excited about, he barely touched it. I'd had enough. The server brought the check to Dad, as expected. He pulled out his reading glasses and examined it with the careful attention he gave all financial matters. I watched him calculate his usual 20% tip, watched him pull out his platinum credit card. I stood up. Excuse me, I called out, my voice cutting through their conversation. Could I see that bill, please? Dad looked startled. What? No, this is our treat. We invited everyone. I'd still like to see it, if you don't mind. The server looked between us uncertainly before handing me the leather portfolio. I scanned the itemized list quickly. Our portion, Cameron's and mine, came to exactly $83, including our share of the service charge. I pulled out my wallet and counted out $90 in cash, placing it on our table. What are you doing? Mom's voice had gone sharp. Paying for our portion, I said simply. Cameron and I, since apparently we're not actually part of this family celebration. You're being childish, Dad snapped. Funny, I thought I was being an adult. Taking responsibility for myself and my real family. I let that word hang in the air, watched him flinch slightly as it registered. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. I helped Cameron with his jacket, gathered my purse. My hands were shaking, but I kept my movements deliberate, calm. If you walk out that door, there will be consequences, Dad said, standing now, his face flushed. I turned to look at him fully. There already are consequences. You just can't see them yet. Tyler found his voice finally. Come on, sis, don't do this. They didn't mean. Yes, they did, I interrupted. They meant every bit of it. Real grandkids, Tyler. He said real grandkids? In front of my 12-year-old son. Madison had the grace to look down at her plate. Mom stood as well, her composure cracking. We've always welcomed Cameron into our home. No, you've tolerated him. There's a difference. And tonight you made it crystal clear where he stands in this family. Where I stand for choosing him. I put my arm around Cameron's shoulders. We're leaving now. Thank you for a very illuminating evening. Aunt Georgia started to say something, but I was already walking toward the door, Cameron beside me. Behind us, I heard Dad call out, The bill is $290. You think leaving 83 covers anything? We still have to pay for. I didn't turn around. Didn't acknowledge it. Just kept walking with my son, out through the main dining room, past the curious stares of other diners, out into the cool evening air. Cameron was silent until we reached the car. When I unlocked it, he climbed into the passenger seat and finally, let himself cry. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears streaming down his face. I held him in the parking lot of Riverside Manor while inside my family presumably finished their dessert and argued about what had just happened. Held him and promised him that we would be okay, that we didn't need people who couldn't love him the way he deserved. The drive home was quiet. Cameron stared out the window at the passing streetlights, occasionally wiping his eyes. When we pulled into our driveway, he turned to me. "Are you going to talk to them again?" "Eventually," I said honestly. "But not until they understand what they did wrong. And maybe not even then." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to go to any more family things." "That's completely understandable. We'll figure it out together, okay?" Inside, I made us hot chocolate and we watched a movie neither of us really paid attention to. My phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from Tyler, from Mom, even one from Aunt Georgia, but I ignored them all. Around midnight, after Cameron had finally gone to bed, I sat at my kitchen table and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. Not just tonight, but all the years of subtle dismissals, the barely concealed disappointment that I'd chosen adoption over giving them biological grandchildren, the way they'd always treated Cameron as somehow less than. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for them, told myself they'd come around, that they just needed more time. How I convinced myself that their distance was just their way, not actual rejection. My phone rang. Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "This is ridiculous, sweetheart. You embarrassed your mother and me in front of the entire family. We were trying to make things easier by giving Cameron his own table, and you turned it into some kind of dramatic scene. You're being incredibly selfish. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults." I deleted it without responding. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Mom sent a long text about how they'd always tried their best with Cameron, how they didn't understand what more I expected from them. Tyler called to say I'd overreacted, that maybe if I'd just explained calmly why I was upset instead of making a scene, things could have been resolved. None of them apologized. None of them seemed to grasp that calling my son anything other than their real grandchild was unforgivable. I blocked their numbers. Changed my email filters to send their messages to a folder I didn't check. When Mom showed up at my house unannounced, I didn't answer the door. Cameron noticed, of course. He was a perceptive kid, always had been. "Are you fighting with Grandma and Grandpa because of me?" he asked one evening while we were making dinner together. "I'm protecting both of us from people who don't treat us with respect," I corrected gently. "That's different than fighting." "But they're your parents. And you're my son. My choice is easy." He was quiet for a moment, chopping vegetables with careful concentration. "At school, Jeremy asked why my skin is darker than yours. I told him I was adopted from Guatemala, and he said that's cool because his cousin was adopted from China." "That is cool," I agreed. But then he asked if my real mom was in Guatemala. Cameron's voice went small. "I told him you're my real mom. But he said that's not what he meant." I put down my knife and turned to face him fully. "Listen to me. I'm your real mother in every way that matters. I'm the one who gets up with you when you're sick. I'm the one who helps with homework and goes to soccer games and listens to you talk about your day. I'm the one who loves you unconditionally, who would move mountains to keep you safe and happy. That's what makes a real parent. Not DNA. Not biology. Love and commitment and showing up every single day." He wrapped his arms around me, and I held him tight. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. So much." 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, a letter arrived from my parents. Not an email or text, but an actual letter on their monogram stationery. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me read it. It was 2 pages of carefully worded non-apology. They were sorry I'd been upset. They hoped we could move past this misunderstanding. They wanted to have a relationship with Cameron, but I needed to be more understanding of their perspective, Their generation's different approach to adoption and family. There was no acknowledgement of what they'd actually done wrong. No recognition of the pain they'd caused. Just a request that I be more accommodating of their prejudices. I wrote back a single sentence: "When you're ready to treat Cameron as your grandson without qualifiers or conditions, we can talk. Until then, please respect our space." I didn't hear from them again for months. Christmas came and went. I took Cameron to visit my best friend Lauren's family instead, where he was welcomed with open arms and genuine affection. We had a beautiful time, full of laughter and warmth and everything family gatherings should be. New Year's passed. Cameron's 13th birthday arrived, and we threw a party with his friends, filled the house with decorations and pizza and terrible music they all loved. Not one member of my biological family reached out. It hurt, I won't lie. Grieving the family I'd wanted, the grandparents I'd hoped my son would have. But every day that passed, I felt lighter. Freer. We built our own traditions. Cameron and I found our own chosen family among friends who loved us both fully. In February, Tyler called from a number I didn't have blocked. I answered by accident, not recognizing it. "Don't hang up," he said quickly. "Please, just listen for a minute." I almost disconnected anyway, but curiosity won out. "What do you want?" "Madison's pregnant again. We just found out." "Congratulations," I said flatly. "The thing is, there were complications. She might not be able to carry to term. The doctor said there's a significant risk." My anger softened slightly. Despite everything, Madison didn't deserve that. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope everything works out." "Thanks." He cleared his throat. "It's made me think a lot about family. About what really matters. And I realized, you were right. About the dinner. About all of it." I waited. What Dad said was unforgivable. How they treated Cameron was unforgivable. I should have said something that night. I should have stood up for you, for him. I was a coward. "Yes, you were," I agreed quietly. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Genuinely sorry. And I've told Mom and Dad they need to do better, need to actually apologize and mean it. But you know how they are." I did know. Proud to a fault. Incapable of admitting when they were fundamentally wrong. "I appreciate you calling, Tyler. I really do. But an apology from you isn't what Cameron I need." "I know. But maybe, could we get coffee sometime? You and me? I'd like to try to rebuild something, even if it's just us." I thought about it. Tyler had failed us that night, but he'd also been raised by the same parents who taught me to value appearances over authenticity, peace over justice. "Maybe," I finally said. "I'll think about it." We hung up, and I sat with a complicated tangle of feelings his call had stirred up. Spring arrived. Cameron made the competitive soccer team and his grades were excellent. He'd made friends with a kid named Marcus whose family had also adopted, and they bonded over their shared experiences. I watched my son flourish, watched him grow more confident and secure in himself. In April, my mother had a heart attack. Not fatal, but serious enough to require surgery and extended recovery. Aunt Georgia called to tell me, her voice tight with judgment when I didn't immediately rush to the hospital. "She's asking for you," Georgia said. "I'm sure she is. Your mother is lying in a hospital bed and you're being petty." "I'm being protective of my child. There's a difference." I sent flowers to the hospital with a card wishing her a speedy recovery. Nothing more. Dad called a few days later, and I answered because I figured I owed him that much. "Your mother almost died," he said without preamble. I heard. "I'm glad she's going to be okay." "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want from me, Dad?" "I want my daughter back. I want my family together." "Then maybe you should think about what you said at your anniversary dinner. About real grandkids." Silence stretched between us. "I was trying to make things easier for everyone," he finally said. "By making my son eat alone? By telling him he wasn't really part of the family?" "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant. And until you can acknowledge that, until you can genuinely apologize to Cameron, not to me, to him, we have nothing to discuss." I hung up before he could respond. May brought warm weather and the end of Cameron's school year. He'd been invited to a summer soccer camp, a huge honor. We celebrated with his favorite dinner and started planning the logistics. My doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. Through the window, I saw my parents standing on the porch, looking older and more uncertain than I'd ever seen them. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "We'd like to talk," Mom said. "If you'll let us." "About?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "About what happened. About Cameron. About everything we've done wrong." I studied them both, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. Found only exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. "Cameron's upstairs. If you're going to say anything, you say it to both of us." They nodded. I called Cameron down. He appeared at the top of the stairs, saw who was there, and his whole body went tense. "It's okay," I told him. "Come here, baby." He came to stand beside me, and I put my arm around his shoulders. My parents looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time since I'd brought him home. Mom's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Dad's face had lost its usual certainty. "Cameron," Dad started, then stopped. "Try it again. We owe you an apology. A real one." Cameron didn't say anything, just pressed closer to my side. "What I said at our anniversary dinner was wrong. Calling you anything other than our grandson was cruel and untrue. You are our grandson. You are part of this family. And we should have made that clear from the very beginning, from the day your mother brought you home." Mom stepped forward slightly. "We were wrong to treat you as anything less than what you are, our grandchild who we should have loved and welcomed unconditionally. We let our own prejudices and outdated ideas about family harm you and harm your mother. We're deeply sorry." I felt Cameron's breathing change, faster and shallower. His eyes were fixed on the floor. "We don't expect you to forgive us right away," Dad continued. "We don't deserve that. But we want to do better. To be better. If you'll give us the chance." The silence stretched out. I waited, letting Cameron take the lead. Finally, he looked up at them. "You made me feel like I didn't belong. Like I was less than Aubrey and Jackson because I wasn't born to my mom." "I know," Dad said quietly. "And that was unforgivable. But you're asking me to forgive you anyway." Mom's voice cracked. "We're asking for the chance to earn your forgiveness. Over time. By showing you through our actions that we mean what we're saying." Cameron looked up at me, those dark eyes full of questions and hurt and a fragile, tentative hope. I gave him the smallest nod. His choice. Whatever he decided, I would support. "Okay," he said finally. "But if you mess up again, we're done. For real this time." "Understood," Dad agreed. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no sudden rush of warmth or tears of joy. My parents came inside, we sat in the living room, and we had a long, difficult conversation about boundaries and expectations and what needed to change. They didn't get to jump back into our lives. They had to earn their way back, slowly, proving through consistent actions that they meant their apology. Weekly calls where they asked Cameron about his interests. Attending his soccer games. Treating him with the same love and attention they gave Aubrey and Jackson. It took time. Months of careful rebuilding. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns emerged and I had to firmly shut them down. But gradually, painfully, something new took shape. Cameron's 13th birthday party the following year included his grandparents. They sat with everyone else, treated him like the miracle he was, and even Dad teared up when Cameron thanked everyone for coming. The anniversary dinner the following spring was different too. One table. One family. Cameron sat between his grandparents, talking animatedly about his science fair project while they listened with genuine interest. I caught Dad's eye across the table at one point. He raised his wine glass slightly in my direction, acknowledgement of how far we'd come and how close we'd come to losing everything. When the bill came this time, Dad didn't hesitate. He paid for everyone, including leaving a generous tip. As we were leaving, he pulled me aside. "Thank you for not giving up on us entirely," he said. "For giving us the chance to do better." "I didn't do it for you," I replied honestly. "I did it for Cameron. Because he deserved grandparents who loved him the way he should have been loved from the beginning." "I know. And we're trying to be those grandparents now." "Keep trying," I said. "Every day." He nodded, understanding that this wasn't absolution. It was probation. Earned trust, not freely given. Cameron came bounding over, talking excitedly about the dessert we'd just had. Dad listened, asked questions, engaged fully. Mom joined us, adding her thoughts, smiling at her grandson with unmistakable affection. It wasn't perfect. Some wounds take years to fully heal. But standing there watching my parents interact with my son, seeing them finally treat him as the gift he'd always been, I felt something close to peace. The road from that first disastrous anniversary dinner to this moment had been painful and necessary. I'd learned that sometimes protecting the people you love means walking away from others, even family. That boundaries matter. That real love is proven through actions, not just words. Cameron had learned that he was worth fighting for. That his mother would always choose him, always protect him, always make sure he knew his value. That family was something you built through commitment and care, not something determined by biology alone. And my parents had learned, finally, that love wasn't conditional. That their grandson deserved better than their half-hearted acceptance. That they'd nearly lost something precious through their own stubbornness and prejudice. We'd all paid a price for those lessons. But looking at Cameron now, confident and secure, surrounded by people who truly loved him, I knew it had been worth every difficult moment. Sometimes the bill comes due in unexpected ways. Sometimes walking away is the only path to eventually coming back together. And sometimes the most important thing you can teach your child is that they are worth more than tolerating disrespect, even from people who should love them unconditionally. Cameron is 15 now, thriving in every way. He still plays competitive soccer, excels in school, and has a tight group of friends. His relationship with his grandparents continues to strengthen, built on that foundation of hard-won respect and genuine effort. And me? I sleep soundly knowing I made the right choice that night at Riverside Manor. The choice to stand with my son, to refuse to accept less than he deserved, to teach him through my actions that his worth was absolute and non-negotiable. The $90 I left on that table was the best money I ever spent. It bought us distance when we needed it, clarity about what mattered, and eventually, a family rebuilt on terms that honored everyone's dignity. Some prices are worth paying. Some hills are worth dying on. And some children are worth everything.